Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks for joining me today. I'm here with a replay against Abzan, which I think is a much more difficult matchup for Merfolk than Jund. Path to Exile is pretty much the biggest reason why that's the case. Path to Exile is one of the few strong answers against Master of Waves. We see another answer to Master of Waves with Maelstrom Pulse over here, but at 3 mana, Jund and Junk both tend to only run this card as a singleton, so we typically don't have to be too afraid of this, but Abzan pretty much always runs 4 copies of Path to Exile, so our Masters of Waves become a lot weaker in this particular matchup. Looking at the opening hands, we see the opponent has a very strong hand, 2 lands, Hand Disruption turn 1, Tarmogoyf or Abrupt Decay turn 2, Maelstrom Pulse or Liliana on turn 3. Very strong, easy keep. On my side, it's a little bit tougher. I've got Harbinger as interaction, Kira to protect my guys, Master of Waves to make a bunch of tokens. In the dark against an unknown opponent, Cavern of Souls is, well, I tend to mulligan hands with Cavern of Souls less often than if this were just another land, because the opponent might be playing counterspells, and Cavern of Souls is extremely strong in those matchups. And Mutavault counts as a creature, especially given that we have the Master of Waves in hand. Mutavault will be that much stronger. So not the best hand on my side, but keepable. So let's go ahead. I think both of us kept. The opponent's going to open with Overgrown Tomb going down to 18 and Inquisition. They can't take the Master of Waves, so they'll almost certainly take away the Kira here. So, Kira down. For my turn, I draw another Master of Waves, which is not too terrible, it's just really slow. So, go ahead and hide this Minamo here. Opponent looks like he drew a 3rd land, which is just about perfect for them. They're going to go down to 17, cracking their fetch land, and go down to 15 for an untapped Temple Garden. Tap 2 mana and play out a Tarmogoyf, which is, I believe, a 3/4 at this point. Back to my side of things, I drew a Silvergill Adept, which is pretty great going into my second turn. Thinking that the opponent may have more hand disruption to get rid of my Harbinger next turn, I decided to play Mutavault here just in case I have no other plays next turn and I want to attack. Also, if the opponent plays Liliana, it's always great to have Mutavault out as a way to potentially get her off the table. So Mutavault into Silvergill, revealing a Harbinger that the opponent already knows about. So let me pause for a sec. I'm going to hide this Mutavault, and at this point the opponent knows about the island, the Cavern of Souls, the Master of Waves, and the Harbinger in my hand. He doesn't know about these last 2 creatures over here that I've drawn into. Okay, so things starting to look a little bit better from that kind of imperfect opening hand that I had. Opponent draws more gas with a Scavenging Ooze. We see we have some creatures in the graveyard already, I guess just 1 with Kira. Opponent attacks for 3 with Tarmogoyf. Going to follow up by cracking a fetch land, getting a basic swamp, only going down to 14. And here's Liliana, edicting as usual, getting the Silvergill off the board. Possible the opponent should not have attacked there with the Tarmogoyf, since I'm going to be able to attack and get Liliana off the table. It's possible that he thought I wouldn't be able to resist bouncing the Tarmogoyf with the Harbinger, but if we have an opportunity to get rid of a Liliana, that's pretty much always the correct path to take. I drew another Island Walk Lord, so I'm getting a ton of gas. I'm just going to need to have some time to get these guys onto the board. So think about my land drop, eventually play the island, and thought a little bit about bouncing the Tarmogoyf, but I didn't want to let the opponent start taking up this Liliana. So really, in the end, pretty easy choice. Activate the Mutavault, get Liliana off the table, and pass back to the opponent. Sitting comfortably at 17 life, this Tarmogoyf is not that threatening. With Liliana in the graveyard now, the Tarmogoyf is swinging as a 4/5. Go from 17 down to 13. And what is the opponent going to follow up with here? We'll see a Scavenging Ooze, which can get bigger if it chooses to eat the 2 creatures in my graveyard. So pausing again, the opponent has now seen this island, and he knows about my cavern and these 2 creatures. Often I'll try to divide my hand. I do this in in real life too with paper Magic. If the opponent has information about certain cards, I'll keep them to one side, separated by a land or something like a Vapor Snag, apart from the rest of the cards that they know about. Another way to do this is to turn the cards that he has information about upside down in your hand. It's important to track. So whatever method you use, just try to find something that you can do pretty consistently, just to keep track of what information the opponent has. All right, another Island Walk Lord. This turn, I don't have any card drawing effects, so I can just go ahead and play the Cavern onto the board. And then I have some choices here. With no devotion on the table, it's not going to be great to play the Master of Waves. Opponent has some great removal in his hand. We didn't know that during the game. Seeing them on 2 cards and us with a handful of crazy gas, I felt pretty strong in this position. Even if he had some removal, we'll be able to push through it with the Mutavault and all of these creatures. This turn, to establish some devotion, I decided just to bounce, I think, the Tarmogoyf with the Harbinger, slow the opponent down a little bit. The Scavenging Ooze will grow, but again, my life total is really high, so I feel totally fine just taking some damage. He's going to eat, I think, both of my creatures here. Starts with the Kira, and then I think is going to fetch a forest, yeah, and eat the other creature. Opponent goes up 2, but he's been slowed down, bouncing the Tarmogoyf, and I'm going to start getting a lot more creatures on the board with these Master of Waves and the Lords. This Siege Rhino is not good news, though. That card can close out games pretty quickly. The Scavenging Ooze attacks me from 13 down to 9, and the opponent has some choices to make second main. They can either go with their 4-drop now, or play their 2-drop back out and leave up Abrupt Decay. Looks like they went with option B. With no creatures in the graveyard anymore, let me pause this again, the opponent currently has information only about one of the Master of Waves in my hand right now. I was saying without creatures in the graveyard, Tarmogoyf I think is just a 3/4 now. Land, sorcery, planeswalker. Yeah. Alright, so for my turn I drew an island, which is fine because we have so many cards we need to play. Again, these Master of Waves have a chance just to totally dominate the game, so with access to 4 blue this turn, I think that going with double Lord of Atlantis is the strongest option. As I mentioned, Maelstrom Pulse is only a singleton in most Jund or Abzan lists, so you shouldn't typically play around Maelstrom Pulse. But when the Abrupt Decay goes for the Harbinger, I pretty much immediately knew that he had the Maelstrom Pulse in hand. So opponent draws a Path to Exile, continuing to draw very nicely. And here we are seeing the Maelstrom Pulse. He's got currently, if we just check again, I think it's now instant, land, planeswalker, sorcery. So Tarmogoyf is a 4/5, and Scavenging Ooze can actually eat another creature out of the graveyard, making it, I think, exactly lethal, taking me down from 9 to 0. A little bit unfortunate the way that game ended up going. I had so much firepower in hand, I just really couldn't get it out onto the board. So game 1 going to the Abzan deck. Let's go ahead and move on to game 2 and see how that one went. Looking at the opening hands, I've got 3 lands, including a Mutavault, 3 creatures, and an Echoing Truth, so pretty keepable. Looking at the opponent's side, we see 3 lands, Tarmogoyf, Grimflayer, Lingering Souls, and Collective Brutality. I think that some Abzan lists are starting to run this as a single copy, or possibly as a 2 of, because the discard effect can be valuable, similar to how Liliana's discard can be valuable for the Abzan decks. They have Lingering Souls, which has flashback, so that going into the graveyard gets some value. And also, lists playing Grimflayer benefit from being able to choose a certain card type to discard into the graveyard so that Grimflayer has his Delirium turned on. So Collective Brutality, a nice piece of removal that can also disrupt my hand and possibly drain life if the opponent has actually more than one card that they want to discard. So I think easy keeps on both sides. We see that the Echoing Truth in my deck interacts favorably with Lingering Souls. So 2 keeps again. I'll open with Wanderwine Hub into Cursecatcher. Opponent just plays a Verdant Catacombs and passes. It's always nice when we don't get our hand disrupted on turn 1. Unfortunately, the opponent played a fetch land and didn't crack it yet, so I can't play my Spreading Seas just yet. Instead, I'll just play the Mutavault and pass the turn back to him. So opponent plays a Swamp and plays out Grim Flare. Now at this point, I see an opportunity to use an Echoing Truth to bounce the Grim Flare and then follow up with a Spreading Seas, taking him off green and white, creating the possibility that if the opponent doesn't have another green mana source to play, that Grim Flare will just be isolated in his hand along with any other green spells that he has. So I'm going to go ahead and take that opportunity here, bounce a Grim Flare with my open mana, and I draw a Silvergill Adept. But I'm going to go ahead with the plan as I outlined it, taking him off green mana, swing for 1 with Cursecatcher, opponent goes down to 17, play an island and pass the turn. Opponent drew a pretty great green mana source there. I mean, he already had a fetch land, but Blooming Marsh, very great, very good new land from Kaladesh. Black-green fast land. So the opponent's going to play Collective Brutality here, discarding Lingering Souls and killing my Cursecatcher, discarding Lingering Souls to see my hand and try to discard a sorcery or instant. Fortunately for me, I don't have any sorceries or instants in my hand, so I get to just keep all the cards that I have. Alright, I drew an island, which is nice because I want to play both of these Silvergill Adepts this turn. Reveal the other Silvergill Adept and draw another Silvergill Adept. Play the island, cast the other Silvergill Adept, and drew a Tidebinder Mage. So things starting to look pretty good for us. Opponent draws a Liliana, the Last Hope. Now I find that this card is not as good as the old Liliana against us. -2/-1 is not enough to deal with any of our 2/2 creatures, of which there are many in the deck. It takes quite a long time to get up to 7 to do her ultimate. The opponent chooses to go with Liliana this turn and is going to kill one of my Silvergills. Plays a Marsh Flats and then passes back. As with the first game, when I had an opportunity to attack and kill the Planeswalker, I took it then, and I'm going to take it now as well. Swing for 4, hoping that the opponent doesn't have a path in hand. So Liliana down, and I'll follow up with Silvergill number 3, revealing Reejerey, and I drew into a Relic of Progenitus. It's very strong against Abzan lists running Delirium and running Lingering Souls. Sorry, I accidentally closed the box that showed which cards the opponent had information about. Pretty sure he knows about like these 2 over here, and that's about it. Alright, looks like the opponent cracked his fetch land on the end step, getting a Godless Shrine, going down to 16 in the process. We see he has access to Maelstrom Pulse this turn if he wants to go that direction. Also, Lingering Souls in the graveyard, and Lingering Souls in hand. We see a Tarmogoyf, and I guess it's currently a 5/6. Let's check our graveyard out. Creature, instant, land, Planeswalker, sorcery. So yep, 5/6 currently. Opponent cracks the Marsh Flats, goes down to 15, and taps out to play the Lingering Souls out of his hand. I guess he has no fear of graveyard disruption at this point, since he hasn't seen anything in my hand when he cast the Collective Brutality. And so rather than flash back the Lingering Souls out of his graveyard to get that value, he decided to just play the one out of his hand. Potentially a slight misstep by the opponent. So that will resolve, and he'll get 2 spirits. For my turn, I draw a 5th land, which is excellent because, as with last game, our hand is kind of backed up with gas that we want to be able to get out onto the table. right after the opponent made a slight misstep playing the Lingering Souls from his hand rather than out of the graveyard, I think I made a slight misstep by playing out my land before playing and cracking the Relic. I knew that I was going to be not only casting the Relic, but also cracking it this turn in order to immediately get rid of these Lingering Souls out of his graveyard. If we pass back to the opponent and they get priority in their main phase, they can start casting, they can cast at least one of these Lingering Souls with their priority before I have a chance to crack the Relic. So it's going to be my best play to put the Relic on the board and crack it right now, but then drawing a card, I might draw a better land such as a Mutavault that I would rather play out than the Cavern of Souls in order to start attacking with the Mutavault as soon as possible. One reason it might not matter so much, though, is that I do have all these creatures in my hand, and I'll probably be using my mana next turn and not attacking with Mutavaults. Whatever the case, you should always wait wait to draw any cards that you might for the turn. In this case with Relic, in other cases it might be with Spreading Seas or Silvergill Adept. But anyhow, a little rushed on playing my land drop there. So as I have mentioned, I'm going to go ahead out and play out the Relic of Progenitus, empty out the graveyards, and I did in fact draw a Mutavault this turn. We can see next turn whether or not that would be relevant or not. I'm going to follow up with Reejerey and start attacking with these Silvergills. Having seen Maelstrom Pulse last game, I do have it in the back of my head. With Tarmogoyf as a 0-1, the opponent can either choose to double block one of my Silvergill Adepts to kill and trade. Also, could just take 6 damage, could block 1 to each just to save damage and just chump with the spirits. So the opponent ends up taking 6. I guess realizing that with me at 20 life, he needs some sort of clock on the board. But he does go down to 9 in the process, and happens to draw into another Lingering Souls. So feeling pressure on his life total, I have to imagine the opponent, let's see, well, he does go ahead and expand his board presence. He casts the Lingering Souls that he just drew and plays out his Grim Flayer again finally. He's really far off from getting Delirium online with Grim Flayer, so we can see how impactful Relic of Progenitus can be against these kinds of decks. I have to say I disagree slightly with him not casting the Maelstrom Pulse here, getting rid of my Silvergill Adepts while he has the chance. Draw into a Spreading Seas, and looking at the opponent's board, we see he only has 1 green source right now. That can potentially help us out quite a great deal. Shutting him off of green takes him off of Maelstrom Pulse, takes him off of any further Grim Flayers or Tarmogoyfs. So I do want to play this Mutavault out, and since it can't attack this turn anyway, it's going to be a good land to tap to get the Spreading Seas going. With all of these lands, and with multiple Merrow Reejereys, we potentially have access to pretty explosive plays this turn. Once the Mutavault is on the board, if I play out the second Reejerey, I'll get 1 untap trigger, so I'll be able to untap a land and still have 4 lands untapped. Then I can play the Tidebinder Mage, untapping 2 of my lands, play the Master of Waves, untap 2 of my lands, and then finally finish with Spreading Seas. And I think that was the line I decided to go with. With the opponent on 1 card, and with so many creatures on the board on his side of the table, we're not really afraid of something like a Damnation right now. Only because, we have 2 Mutavaults, so if he wipes the board, we're still going to be swinging with 2 Mutavaults for 4 power each turn. Alright, so play the Mutavault, cast a second Reejerey, untap a land, play out the Tidebinder. We're going to lock down the Tarmogoyf. Even though he's currently smaller, he can get a little bit bigger than the Grim Flayer. Play Master of Waves now that I have sort of maximum devotion on the table. It's going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tokens. And we'll finish up with the Spreading Seas, taking him off of green mana. And we draw into an Island Walk Lord. With a field of 1/1s and a single 2/2, I feel pretty comfortable swinging in with 2 4/3 Silvergills. The opponent's going to double chump, and I'll pass the turn to him. Draws a Murderous Cut, which is pretty excellent because he can take me off of the Master of Waves, but he doesn't have enough blocks to survive my attack next turn anyway, even without the Master of Waves. So we'll go ahead to the third game. Okay, looking at the opening hands, easy keep on my side. Island Walk Lord, Harbinger to bounce his creatures, Master of Waves, and very importantly, Relic of Progenitus to keep his graveyard thinned. On the opponent's side, we see all white and black cards with all white and black mana. 2 paths, a Thoughtseize for turn 1 potentially, and Lingering Souls for a bit of a clock and defense. So keeps on both sides, so no mulligans at all this entire match. I draw a Vapor Snag, which I'm happy to see as a form of interaction. And I'll go ahead and cast Relic of Progenitus. See the opponent's going to go with Thoughtseize here, and I would personally take the Master of Waves out of this hand, and the opponent indicated that he wanted to take the Master. In games that tend to go really long, Master of Waves can be really difficult to deal with, and he can just bring so much power with him. Potentially the opponent felt comfortable with the 2-path Exiles in his hand that he didn't have to get rid of the Master of Waves. I was a little confused about which Master he wanted, but then he clarified that he actually wanted to take the Island Walk Lord away. So on the opponent's end step, I'll get rid of that Thoughtseize, keep him as far away from Delirium as possible. And for my turn, I don't want to waste this Harbinger yet, but I will reveal the Master of Waves that he already knows about to get an untapped Wanderwine Hub. Let me pause for a second here. The opponent knows what so far here? He knows about this. He took the Master. And yeah, I guess he knows about those spells. He knows about everything except the Minamo. So I chose to play the Wanderwine Hub out here because it's possible that I might want access to 3 blue next turn, and didn't think I was going to want to attack with the Mutavault next turn. Alright, so we see the opponent draws, I think, maybe Gabony Township there. Plays Lingering Souls, gets his 2 spirits, and passes the turn. I get to immediately exile that as his only card in the graveyard with Relic. So Relic, really, really doing a great job this game. For my turn, I draw another Harbinger. Pretty slow development on my side. I go ahead and play out that 3rd blue source, thinking that if I draw a blue source next turn, I'll be able to play both Harbingers and just get rid of both of these spirits. Be able to just leave 3 mana up right now for Vapor Snag and potentially cracking the Relic if I need to, though I really don't think that that's going to happen. The opponent continues to not draw any green sources. Murderous Cut is much worse with an empty graveyard. And we'll see what the opponent chooses to do here. Looks like he just attacked with the spirits and then passed the turn. On his end step with an active Relic here, I just exiled my Master from the my graveyard in order to reduce his options if he plays a Scavenging Ooze or a Tarmogoyf. So I draw a Silvergill Adept, play the Mutavault, and then cast Silvergill, revealing Harbinger. Let me pause for a second. The opponent now knows about these 3 spells in my hand, doesn't know about the 2nd Harbinger. So we do draw that island. I'm going to bounce one of his spirits here. It leaves my Relic vulnerable in case he draws a green source and then Abrupt Decays my Relic when I don't have mana up to pop it in response. But I feel it's time to develop my board, getting more creatures out, and without green mana, I don't feel it's necessary to play around both green mana and Abrupt Decay. The opponent just thinking about whether he wants to use one of these removal spells right now. In the end, he does. He goes with the Path to Exile on Harbinger of the Tides, and then I immediately get rid of that with the Relic of Progenitus. I'm going to go ahead and grab an island. The opponent draws Collective Brutality. So let's see what he goes with this turn. Starts with Collective Brutality, discarding a Lingering Souls, killing the Silvergill Adept, and then probably flashing back the Lingering Souls. I reveal my hand to the opponent, and unfortunately he does get to grab a Vapor Snag. So a more a stronger collective brutality there than the first time we saw it in the match. So Silvergill bites the dust. We're going to see the flashback Lingering Souls, and a little misstep, no attack with the one spirit by the opponent. During my upkeep, I will exile the collective brutality from the opponent's graveyard, and then I draw a Vapor Snag, replacing the one that the opponent just took. So these spirits are not particularly threatening. The opponent's been on 4 lands for a little while now, and they need to draw specifically green mana in order to get Gavany Township going. I do have a Vapor Snag to get rid of one of the spirits, so this board presence here is not particularly threatening to my 18 points of life over here. So I'm just going to run out a Harbinger here and then follow up with a Master of Waves. Unfortunately, the opponent has 2 strong pieces of removal for the Master of Waves. So we see an Abrupt Decay, but without green mana, the Relic of Progenitus is safe, and the Harbinger is safe. The opponent tries to go with Abrupt Decay, and I just tell him that doesn't work. I find it hard to believe he doesn't realize that he is off of green mana this game. I guess that's the first green spell he actually drew all game. And we both commented on how strange it is that he doesn't have access to green at this late point in the game. Swings with 3 spirits and passes the turn. Another misstep by the opponent. With me tapped out, he probably should have used one of these pieces of removal to get rid of the Master of Waves while he had the opportunity. As it went, I have a Vapor Snag that if he chooses to remove the Master of Waves, I'll be able to save him, bring him back to my hand with the Vapor Snag. Showing one way that Vapor Snag can be superior to Dismember. Can save our creatures rather than just killing an opponent's creature. Looks like I drew an Island Walk Lord for the turn. Choose just to play that guy out, activate the Mutavault, and go for the biggest attack possible. We're going to see a Path to Exile here, and as I mentioned in response, I have Vapor Snag available. And with an empty graveyard, the opponent can't even follow up with Murderous Cut to make sure that the Master of Waves actually dies. So again, another way that Relic has done a great job this game is by keeping Murderous Cut offline by not allowing Delve to get going. Alright, so I save my Master, and it looks like the opponent's going to take 6 here. Pass back to them. They draw into a Siege Rhino, but without green mana, they don't have a great deal of choice here. So they're going to activate the Shambling Vent to gain a little bit of life. Seems like a smart call here. They leave 2 spirits back as blockers, and I'm not going to trade this Lord off, so I'll take 3 damage, and the opponent will go up 2 to 14. I'll crack Relic here finally because at this point in the game, with only 1 card in hand, the Relic has pretty much done its job, and we want to draw a few more cards to get things going. You see that I drew through an extra land into a Tidebinder Mage. With no green creatures currently on the board, the Tidebinder, not particularly useful this turn, and with the opponent off of green mana the entire game, and with him having just gained 2 life, and potentially more off the Shambling Vent, I think my decision here was just to run out the Tidebinder and then maximize my tokens with Master of Waves. Potentially a misstep. I had a decent position on the board and could have attacked into these spirits with the Harbinger and the Mutavault. Held the Tidebinder up in order to tap something if he does draw green mana, and then continue attacking with the other creatures. But I took this opportunity to just present an overwhelming force. See, the opponent draws a land, actually a fetch land, which is extremely, well, I guess it's not the most relevant here, but it will get a card into the graveyard, which will turn Delve on a little bit more than it currently is. If they put a fetch land in here, then effectively they have access to, let's see, 6 mana. So if they get green off the fetch land, then they can pay 4 and exile that land. Yeah, let's see how it goes, actually. Actually, what they can do is they can crack the Marsh Flats, get green, pay black and green to cast Abrupt Decay. Then there will be 2 cards in the graveyard, and they can pay 3 plus those 2 for Murderous Cut. So this fetch land actually turned on both pieces of removal in the opponent's hand. Draw a Reejerey for the turn and sort of feel a little bit invincible here with an extra Lord. Activate Mutavault, swing with everybody minus the Master, I think. Just because even if the opponent does have some removal in hand for a Lord, I don't want him to be able to block and kill my Master of Waves. So opponent finally getting his green mana going, decides to get, I guess he has to get a shock land here because he drew a black-white fetch. So if it was a Verdant Catacombs, he could have just gotten a basic forest. But here we're going to see the line I just outlined, Abrupt Decay taking care of the Reejerey, and Murderous Cut taking care of Master of Waves. If we pause there and just look at the damage I'm still presenting, the opponent's gone down to 8 life, and I'm still attacking with 3, 3, 3, and 2. Definitely lethal, and the opponent's going to have to make some tough blocks, I think. Is going to get rid of my Lord and then chump a Harbinger, and then he's going to take 5 going down to 3. Pretty powerful. I'm sorry, let me pause for a sec. No, it took 6 from these guys, going down to 2. And I'm saying pretty powerful follow-up available with Siege Rhino. Drew into another fetch land. And here we're going to see that Siege Rhino taking me all the way down to 8 and the opponent all the way up to 5. I drew a land, and at this point I was starting to get a little bit worried because I've gone from what seemed a totally dominant board position to one where I could easily lose. The opponent starts drawing a couple of good cards, even one more creature. They can start activating Gavany Township and attacking with Trample. So this land, a little bit frightening coming off the top of the deck. I am going to lean, however, and force the opponent into a good top deck. If I attack with my 3 creatures, he'll eat one of them and take 4, going all the way down to 1. That actually turns off this fetch land and really just forces the opponent to draw something, either removal or a creature. And we see that he drew into a piece of removal with Liliana. So he goes ahead and casts Liliana. It's worth noting that he currently cannot activate Shambling Vent because he only has 2 lands left over, and one of them he can't even activate because he's at 1 life. So Liliana is going to make me sacrifice a creature, and I thought a long while, well, not really long, about which creature I wanted to get rid of. And it seemed pretty obvious that Mutavault is the one to sacrifice here. If I top deck a Master of Waves, my devotion will get me right back into the game. So sacrifice the Mutavault and untap. So after drawing an island last turn, I hit a Master of Waves, which I guess is deserved after the opponent top decked a Liliana. So I'll play that Master of Waves. He'll bring 3 tokens in with him, which is certainly enough to lean on the opponent and kill him next turn if he doesn't find exactly a path or another Murderous Cut. He drew a Grim Flayer. Quick analysis here shows that if he activates Shambling Vents as a blocker, he can play the, he can play the Grim Flayer here, but then he still can't crack this Marsh Flats at 1 life, so he can't both play the Grim Flayer and activate Shambling Vents as a blocker. If he activates Shambling Vents as a blocker, can eat Harbinger of the Tides, go up to 3 life, block Master of Waves, but then he's still going to be taking all the damage from these elementals over here. So at this point, the opponent thinks quickly about his options, and I think realizes that it's a good game. So very interesting, enjoyable match against Abzan. Let me know what you think about the lines that I took and whether I had more effective plays. Would you guys have played out the Tidebinder into the Master of Waves like I did, or would you have kept the Tidebinder in hand? In retrospect, I think I probably would have just played the Master of Waves, and instead of playing the Tidebinder, probably just activate Mutavault and attack now that it's getting buffed by the Master of Waves. But anyhow, hindsight is 20/20, and a big reason I make these videos is to learn more and faster about the deck that we all play. So as always, thanks for watching, guys. Share any comments you might have. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks very much.